Okay, welcome back to another video. In this, we're going to look at a similar thing to what we were doing before, only we're going to actually sketch a more detailed graph of a quadratic like this. So we've got a quadratic here, x squared plus 2x minus 3. And what I want to do is I want to find the vertex, the intercepts, and then graph it. Okay? So first of all, in our last video, we talked about how to find the vertex, right? I'm going to maybe switch to a different color so we don't get confused as to what's our actual solution here. The vertex, remember, happened at negative b over 2a, right? So my x value of the vertex, I'm just going to do negative b, so negative 2 divided by 2 times a. A is 1. Okay. So I get negative 1. Okay. So that's the x value of the vertex. How do I get the y value? Well, we just plug that x value back into the original equation to figure out what it is. Okay. So we get plus 2 times negative 1 minus 3. So we get 1 minus 2 minus 3. So 1 minus 2 is negative 1, minus 3 is negative 4. So our vertex is going to be at negative 1, negative 4. Okay? So that's our vertex. So how did we get that again? We did the negative b over 2a, and then plugged that into the equation to figure out what the y value was. Okay? So we have the vertex. So now let's look at intercepts. Okay? Let's look at our intercepts. What kind of intercepts can you have for a graph? Well, we want to find all of them. So let's start with, I don't know, it doesn't matter. We'll do the x-intercepts, okay? X-intercepts, okay? To get the x-intercepts, I don't know if you remember, but to get the x-intercepts, right, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So what you're going to do to get that is you're going to set y equal to 0. Okay? So what we're going to do in this equation is just set y equal to 0 and then solve for x. So we get 0 is x squared plus 2x minus 3. Okay? So that's going to be how we get our x-intercepts there. Okay? So what we do, how do we solve this for x then? Well, this is a quadratic equation set equal to 0, so we can use the quadratic formula or we can factor it, either one. Let's try factoring first because generally that's a little bit easier. So let's look for numbers that multiply to negative 3 and add to positive 2. So we should get here, I think 3 and 1 is probably what we're going for. And we'll put a negative on the 1 so that we get 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. 3 times negative, or 3 plus negative 1 is 2. Okay, so that works. So that factors. So we get 0 is x plus 3, x minus 1. So what are our two x-intercepts? Well, they're at negative 3 and positive 1. Okay? So those are our two x-intercepts are at negative 3 and positive 1. Those are the x-intercepts. Okay? Now there's one other type of intercept we can have, right? The other type of intercept we can have is the y-intercept, right? To find the y-intercept in an equation, you do the opposite. You always set the other variable equal to 0. So you're going to set x equal to 0 to find the y-intercept. Okay? So notice when you set x equal to 0 in this, you get 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 3 is negative 3, right? So our y-intercept is just negative 3. Okay? So we got an x-intercept, or x-intercepts, or y-intercepts. That's all the intercepts you can have. So we got our vertex and our intercepts. It's finally time to graph it. Okay. So I'm going to get a fresh board for us here, and I'll write down that information again. Okay, so fresh board here. So the info we found the vertex was -1, -4. And the x-intercepts, we found were at, over here, right? -3 and +1. And then the y-intercept, that happened at y is -3, right? So how would I actually sketch a graph of this? Well, let's draw a little graph for us here. Well, let's start with the vertex. I know the vertex is over 1 to the left and then down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're right there. Okay. Then our x-intercepts are at -3. And so right here and at +1. Okay. And then our y-intercept is down here at -3, right there. Okay. So what have we got here? We're going to have a nice parabola shape like that. Okay. So that's what our graph would look like. Okay. If there was a negative in front of the x squared, how would that look differently? Well, it would be upside down. This one doesn't look like that because it has a positive x squared, but in this case it's going to be upwards facing. Okay. So let's just kind of review again how we find all the pieces that we use to actually make this graph. So how was it that we found all these pieces in order to do this? So to find the vertex, the vertex is always your -b over 2a. Unless it's already in vertex form where you can just see the vertex immediately. But if it's in this kind of expanded out form, you need to do -b over 2a and then plug in the x to get your y. Okay, so that's where your vertex will be. That's how you get your vertex. Okay, to get your x-intercepts, you're going to set y equal to 0 and solve for x. Okay. So if you're just always going to set y equal to 0 and solve for x. If you can factor it, right, that's what you would do to solve it. So then to solve, factor or use the quadratic formula. Okay. Sometimes the x-intercepts can be nasty decimals, and then you just kind of estimate where they are using your calculator if you use the quadratic formula. Okay. So that's how we get our x-intercepts. Also, if you had gotten if you did the quadratic formula and you got like 3 plus the square root of -2 over 7 or something along those lines. Not saying that this would always be one, but maybe you got this as an example for your answer for an x-intercept. Well, this is a square root of a negative number, so it's an imaginary number, right? It's not real, so there would be no x-intercepts in that case. Okay, so if you got one that had imaginary x-intercepts, then it wouldn't touch the x-axis anywhere, right? It would be above it. Okay. And then lastly, Let's look at the y-intercept. How do we find that? Well, we set x equal to 0 and then find y. That's probably the easiest one to find out of all of those, right? So essentially when you do this, right, you just find the vertex, find the x-intercepts, find the y-intercept, and then sketch a graph. If you need more points, like you can't tell just from the points you have, you can always plot more points if you need to fill in like more of the graph. But generally, that's all you should really need. Okay. Yeah. So I think that should help with this. We will move on to the next video.